Be careful what you wish for. Imagine a society that just wants to be safe, fair, and stable. That sounds reasonable, right? Now imagine that every step along the way, people supported new measures in the name of safety or order. Step by step, those good intentions accidentally built something nobody wanted. A system where everything was controlled. This video is a thought experiment, a story about how easy it is to slip from freedom into total control, and why it never works in the long run. Welcome back to Thinking and Being. If you like what you see today, please go ahead and like and subscribe, as this will enable you to see more content from myself and others just like this. And just go ahead and click those buttons and see what happens. I don't think you're going to regret it. In our last video, we talked about critical thinking and the traps that keep us from zooming out. This is the same lesson, but applied to society. History shows us that when citizens stop zooming out, when they only look at today's trade-off, not tomorrow's consequences, they can actually vote and cheer their way into tighter control. The danger isn't that people choose tyranny, it's that they choose safety, efficiency, and unity until they realize too late where the slope ends. So first, let's talk about that slippery slope that society can get into. First, there's enhanced safety. It always starts with safety and security. A city installs more cameras on street corners, adds new police patrols, and invests in faster emergency response. People cheer. Of course they do. Who doesn't want safer streets and quicker help? London famously rolled out one of the world's largest closed-circuit television networks after waves of crime and terror attacks, and most citizens welcomed it. Singapore did something similar with cameras and strict enforcement, and the streets became incredibly safe. On the surface, these moves work. Crime goes down, citizens feel protected, and politicians get credit. But safety is also the easiest place to trade freedom for comfort. When we say yes here, we start accepting the logic that more control equals more order. And once that equation takes root, it rarely stops at the first step. Next, there's centralized data. The next step feels modern, efficient, even futuristic. Centralizing all that data. Imagine one ID card or one app that unlocks every service. Healthcare, voting, taxes, even boarding a train. China has experimented with this. India created Aadhaar, a massive biometric ID program for over 1 billion citizens. Governments pitch it as a convenience. No more lost paperwork, no more fraud, faster benefits. Who wouldn't want that? But centralization also means a single authority that holds all the keys. Who you are, where you go, and what you do. In the short term, it feels like modernization. In the long term, it erases friction, the very friction that used to protect us by making abuse harder. When the data lives in one vault, whoever holds that vault holds you. And then there's predictive policing and monitoring. With better data, the pitch becomes prevention. Why react to crime after it happens when we can stop it before it happens? Algorithms scan patterns, flagging neighborhoods or even individuals as high risk. Cities like LA and Chicago have tested predictive policing, claiming it makes communities safer. On paper, this sounds like science fiction working for good. In practice, it often reinforces old biases, targeting the same groups, the same areas, over and over. And once people are flagged, surveillance expands. Location data, financial transactions, even online comments. The logic makes sense. If we can spot danger early, we can stop it. But this step shifts the social contract. You're no longer innocent until proven guilty. You're monitored because you might be guilty. And once that mindset sets in, it's hard to turn back. And then there's expansion of surveillance. Surveillance then scales from targeted to total. Cameras aren't just on main streets anymore. They're everywhere. Buses, trains, schools, workplaces. Online activity is swept up too. Metadata, search histories, flagged keywords. After 9/11, the US Patriot Act expanded government surveillance powers dramatically, all justified for national security. China's Great Firewall monitors internet use in real time, shaping what citizens can see or say. Even democratic countries often demand mass surveillance as if you've done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear. And for many, that logic does work, until one day they discover that privacy isn't just for criminals, it's for the average citizen. At this stage, people still feel safe, but their personal space has quietly evaporated. And then comes the legal shortcut, temporary emergency powers. A crisis hits. Maybe it's war, maybe terrorism, maybe a pandemic. And leaders say, we need extraordinary authority, just for now, to protect you. Citizens usually agree. Who wouldn't? It feels responsible. But history shows that these powers rarely shrink back to where they started. The Weimar Republic voted to give its leaders emergency authority, and those tools later paved the road for Nazi control. People aren't saying yes to dictatorship, they're saying yes to solving crises. But by normalizing these exceptions, they quietly erase the rule of law. And then there's controlling the narrative. Once information is centralized, it's easy to manage the story. At first, it looks helpful. Remove clear lies, fight fake news, keep the public safe from manipulation. Citizens nod along, and who doesn't want the truth? But soon the definition of dangerous content expands. Dissenting voices can now be labeled as misinformation. Alternative opinions are dismissed as destabilizing. Shows on the air can now be canceled because they don't agree with a certain narrative. In the Soviet Union and in Nazi Germany, controlling media wasn't sold as censorship. It was sold as protecting the people. And most don't notice when the line between the two disappears. The next step is logically restricting freedoms. After the story is controlled, freedoms begin to contract. Protests require permits that mysteriously never get approved. Critics are branded as agitators, threats, or even traitors. Ordinary speech and assembly shrink under the justification of public order. On paper, freedoms still exist. In practice, they've become hollow. This is the point where citizens start to sense that something is wrong. But by now, the system has enough grip and enough power to keep most people quiet. And order becomes the new obedience. And then there's the rug pull. Congratulations, you've arrived at full authoritarian control. The society that only wanted safety, efficiency, and unity has built the very system it feared most. No free media, no genuine protest, no criticism of government without consequence, and a very, very large and centralized, controlling, and powerful government. The slope never felt steep. Each step seemed practical, even beneficial. But together they created what every historical example shows us, a totalitarian system. And history also shows us something else. These systems look powerful in the moment, but they eventually collapse, because control without adaptability just cannot last.
Politics becomes the struggle to control the flows of data. And dictatorship now means that too much data is being concentrated in the hands of the government or of a small elite. The greatest danger that now faces liberal democracy is that the revolution in information technology will make dictatorships more efficient than democracies. With the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, it might become feasible to process enormous amounts of information very efficiently in one place, to take all the decisions in one place, and then centralized data processing will be more efficient than distributed data processing. And then the main handicap of authoritarian regimes in the 20th century, their attempt to concentrate all the information in one place, it will become their greatest advantage.
And one of the things I do in my videos is I do a YouTube content creator shout out, and today I want to promote Yuval Noah Harari. I do this because these YouTube creators have incredibly engaging and educational content. They've inspired me to be on YouTube myself, and of course for this they deserve some credit. Yuval has great content about human nature, psychology, and how we've interacted with different forms of information and collective intelligence throughout history. I've also recently listened to his audiobook, Nexus, which you can get as a hardback as well, which discusses how information has evolved over time and how, for it to become official in any context in human society, there also has to be some bureaucracy to control that information, including information from things like the Bible. Eventually, all information that becomes organized is subject to some kind of control, which in the long run is an interesting cycle to think about. I'll leave a link to his channel as well as to a video about one topic I'm particularly passionate about, the evolution of humanity in the context of artificial intelligence. Okay, back to this video. Next, let's talk about history and why this path fails. First, there's the example of Nazi Germany. Weimar Germany shows how fragile democracies can be. Emergency powers, censorship of opposition, control of radio and newspapers, all supported by many citizens in the name of restoring order. But totalitarianism eventually collapsed under its own brutality and the devastation of war. The lesson here is what begins as law and order can end in ruin. And then there's the Soviet Union. The Soviet state built one of history's most elaborate surveillance and propaganda machines. It centralized information, silenced dissent, and controlled nearly every aspect of life. For decades, it seemed unshakable. Yet it eventually collapsed under economic stagnation, corruption, and the sheer weight of managing total control. No system that blocks feedback forever can adapt indefinitely. Today, Russia shows how information control remains central to power. Independent media are restricted, narratives are tightly managed, journalists are highly controlled, and dissent is punished. But cracks are visible, from economic pressures to citizens finding alternative channels. History suggests this model, too, carries seeds of fragility. And then there's fascist Italy and Francoist Spain. In the 20th century Europe, fascist and authoritarian regimes promised national revival. Citizens said yes to safety, yes to unity, yes to tradition. But each system, while powerful in the short term, ended up brittle, too rigid to adapt to modern economic and social realities. And then there's China's dynasties. Even outside modern politics, history tells the same story. The Ming Dynasty centralized authority, limited dissent, and tightly controlled information. For a time it worked, until corruption, rigidity, and external shocks broke the system. Yuval Noah Harari reminds us in the book Nexus that information networks are the lifeblood of empires. Block them too much and the empire suffocates. And to sum it up, why does control typically fail? Yuval Noah Harari's book Nexus explains why. Information is both a tool of power and a network of resilience. Totalitarian regimes try to dominate it, but by doing so, they choke the very adaptability that keeps societies alive and thriving. Every empire that walked this path eventually fell, not because people resisted it at first, but because systems built on total control cannot evolve. They collapse under their own weight. Thanks for watching today. My 3 key takeaways are: good intentions can drift into control. Safety today can become surveillance tomorrow. Second, every empire that tried total control eventually failed. Rigidity kills adaptability. And last, are you watching where we're going? Does any of this feel familiar? So what do you think? Are you seeing anything today that this video reminds you of? Comment below and tell us what you think. If you like what you saw today, please go ahead and like and subscribe, as it will keep content like this coming your way. And it's my goal to make this content entertaining and funny, enlightening and educational, as well as a little bit nostalgic. Stay tuned as we're going to get back into core topics like physics and philosophy and psychology and culture and all the intersections in between. But until then, keep thinking and being, and do not go gentle into that good night.